to homes on cul-de-sacs, you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Ask Mr. Greenthumb in Real Estate Show with Stan DeFreitas, the dad, and James DeFreitas, the son. For the next hour, call in with your questions about gardening, growing your favorite veggies, and growing your profits in real estate. Call them anytime at 727-254-7127. That's 727-254-7127. And now, your hosts, Stan and James DeFreitas.
And I am Stan DeFreitas, Mr. Greenthumb, and I'm glad that you're with us. And also, of course, as he is with me almost all the time, my son, James DeFreitas.
And, of course, I am here in studio today as well. I won't be exactly this Sunday, but after, the shows that we tape, I am here. So, and, of course, anytime we do the shows, they also go out live on Facebook. So, if that's the method and means with which you like to communicate, you certainly can do that. The other thing, if you're a podcaster type person, you can go to Apple Podcasts. I know our show is being, sent up there when it's finished. So if you like to listen on your own time, and a lot of people do, so you can go and do it that way. So that's always a good thing. If you have gardening questions, you can always point your browser to askmrgreenthumb.com. That's ASKMR greenthumb.com. And you can ask a question directly through the website. If you have a bug ID or if there's something wrong with a tree, you can certainly get your question answered in that way. And we totally recommend doing that because knowledge is power.
I did get a question the other day, a little squiggly line, the lady said, in her tomato leaf, and it was going all over. And that is leaf miner. It's actually a little maggot form of a fly, a little worm stage, if you will, that's eating between the upper and lower epidermal.
Worm stage sounds better than maggot.
All right. Well, same thing.
I just put a little marketing spin on that for you.
Yeah, that sounds better. Always got to have the right marketing.
Right.
It's like we inject trees. Don't want to use the word inject because that sounds bad.
It sounds scary.
It sounds scary, but I can tell you if you've been a heart patient like I have, you get injected or you get popped.
We give the trees a lollipop.
When we're through. But, one of the things I was going to say with the leaf miner is you can find at the end of that trail, you'll find the little leaf miner. If there's just one little, you'll actually see it raised, and you take a magnifying glass and you could pinch that part of the leaf and you could kill the little leaf miner who's between the leaves. Problem with using any kind of systemic on leaf miners, which would work, is that you're going to eat those tomatoes. So how much systemic do you want on those tomatoes that you're about to eat? So I would say either pinch the leaf if it's just one, or if the leaf looks like a road map, go ahead and take your scissors and cut that leaf off, or a couple leaves off that are highly infected, and get rid of them. If you throw it right down on the ground next to the plant and the little leaf miner pupates, it's going to go right back up and get another leaf.
I see. So if you want less of something, you don't encourage more of something.
But you can't believe how many times when I was at the community garden, which I used to help work with down in 62nd Avenue, 22nd Avenue in St. Pete. And this was going back many, many years ago when I was there almost every week as part of an extension agent that I was. I would see people breaking off leaves and just throwing it down next to the tomato plant. And
Which
I thought,
does you no good.
It'd be like Johnny Appleseed throwing his seeds down going, I wonder where all these apples are coming from.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I would imagine a lot of people just are not putting it together as to what they're doing, and then they're not realizing that you're actually helping to propagate the very thing that you don't want.
And the same thing happens, let's say if you're getting powdery mildew on a leaf, yes, you can spray it, but sometimes cutting off that bottom leaf that's full of powder and getting rid of it may be good sanitation, may be as important a rule as anything. And I say that for people, even when you're going to the hospital, you wash your hands in every chance I get it in the hospital because I know that's where the sick people are. Mm-hmm. So try to be, we don't always think about that in our yard and garden, but the more you can keep it, those diseases from getting really a foothold. Watering early in the evening, probably not as good. You probably have that water sits there all night long and you increase that chance of mildew and fungi. And yes, some mildews and fungi, the world probably wouldn't be here without mildews and fungi. So I thought, why did God make fungi? Well, it breaks things down.
It breaks things down.
And that's needed. Now, if it's coming out of your tree, That's a problem. If it's in a palm, your tree's probably going to die. If you see that half a mushroom, it's Ganoderma. Take that and put it on an oak tree. Tree might live 25 more years.
Yeah, and that's interesting too that you bring that up because we treated a tree recently for one of your longtime clients, and again, the tree had, typically in the tree trimming industry, they just refer to it as like, "Well, that's butt rot," they'll say something.
Well, that's the common name for it.
That's the common name for it, but they won't know that it's the fruiting body that you're actually seeing when you actually see the mushroom growth on the outside of the tree. So, now I think it looks kind of bad. So I usually take my heel of my shoe and I'll kick off the fruiting body. I don't think that actually does anything other than it gives the tree a slightly more normal looking appearance. But one of the things that we do know is that if the tree is competing with that and you have that going on in your tree, to your point, it can last a long time. That's great. But again, if your tree is lacking proper nutrients, if it isn't, if it hasn't been fertilized in years, and let's say you have secondary infection taking place too, and I don't know that there's any data on this, and maybe you do know this, if a tree does have mushroom growth growing on the outside of the bark, it would seem to me that it would be a calling card for beetles and other things to want to set in.
Often the tree will emit some hormones that the borers go, it's Meals on Wheels. Our job is to break things down too, just like the fungi.
Sure.
I would say I would compare some of the fungi that go into the side of the trees and leave these shelf mushrooms. It's kind of like cancer. If it grows in just one spot, the tree can live with it for a good long time if it's an oak. Mm-hmm. But if it starts to spread quickly, and the same thing with a person, if it metastasizes and you get a cancer that's here, 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 and here, well, then the prognosis becomes much shortened. And even with a tree, I mean, if you say 20 years, in my customer's case, I'm willing to bet I may not be here, and I guarantee my customer won't be here 20 years from now in that particular case.
Sure.
I mean, I wish that weren't the case because, she's a great customer.
Right, but in the same vein, though,
And a person, as a friend.
and as a friend, yeah. But in the same vein, though, is one of the sayings that I kind of like is the hero is the person that plants the seed of a tree that they will never see. And so the common argument that we'll get, especially from older customers or older clients, is they'll say, "Well, I don't really care about treating that tree because I won't be alive to see it." And I encourage people to really think about that statement for a second, because what you're saying is that if you don't get to enjoy it, it doesn't have any value. And I'm here to say that that's taking the short view. Mm. And I think that you really should take a look at the tree and probably have it treated, because the tree perhaps has value, an intrinsic value or a contributory value to your home. And sometimes people will build their house entirely around live oak trees that have been there for hundreds of years because of the rich character that the trees provide to that home. And we've treated trees like that. And so I guess what I'm saying is that's a very short-sighted, narrow view. And I would really encourage people to look beyond their own lifetimes when you're thinking of something that lives 300 and 400 years.
And speaking of that, another customer of mine named Frank, I'll just say his first name, he was asking me yesterday, they want to plant a tree for his church, and they want to plant it and get something fairly good sized, and they're going to do one each season. And they're thinking that, and he knows he won't be here for that tree.
Right.
Other than he liked the idea of planting a good-sized tree and maybe put a little tag next to the tree in memory of one of the
Frank.
church memories.
Right.
Frank, or maybe his wife, or
somebody that he designates.
that they cared about, or some other church member. And I thought, what a neat idea. If you could go to the church grounds, which are often big, mm-hmm. and you could have a tree and you could have a little tag, Mrs. Smith, Jones, whoever it could be, and or Mr. And you could say, hey, this person we remember. And I remember my great aunt, Edith Rolls, she used to have a tree that was a jacaranda. Now jacarandas are sometimes considered junk trees because they're weak. Mm-hmm. But it was a beautiful tree, purple, beautiful tree. And she said her ashes of her husband had been put around this tree. So it had a special meaning for her.
Right.
And I was a young child at the time, but I thought, what a neat thing. Even there that she identified, you could see with that tree, it had meaning for her.
Right. Yeah.
And I thought, they're going to, I sometimes wonder, we did a story, actually, when we were doing a show on CBS, and we did one on the camphor. And as soon as I did the show, I had a call from one of the extension horticulturists going, hey, the camphor tree is considered a junk tree. And I thought, okay, in certain situations it can be. But we also have a state record tree right there in Gulf to Bay, and US 19 is one of the biggest camphor trees you'll ever see.
It's right there in the Perkins parking lot.
Parking lot.
Yeah.
And that tree is a state record tree. And okay, and I've got a camphor in my backyard, and so does my neighbor, actually. I don't know if I'd have planted a camphor where it's at because I think it's a little too close to my pool, even though it's 25, 30 feet away.
The big issue and probably the big takeaway here is they get to be massive and they have an enormous root structure.
And that can be a problem. You may have to trim down the roots. On the other hand, who decides and says, everybody gets together and they go, that's a junk, that's good. That's junk, that's good.
Well, and again, I don't have the background you have, but it seems to break down to native and non-native. And you've got the folks that sit back and say, well, if it's native and it was meant to be here, it's allowed to exist. And then if it's non-native, then people will say, well, it shouldn't have ever been here. And so that seems to be how I'm noticing the two camps breaking down.
But I find that same group of people that say, oh, don't want it because it's non-native. If you said, well, this person, that person, and this person, and that person, which is 90% of our population, is not native.
Right.
Are you going to send them all out because they weren't native? Well, no, that's different.
Right.
Well, how different is it? How different is it for you to go, that's bad, bad, bad? The jacaranda's a beautiful tree. Now,
Sure.
it's a weak tree.
Yeah, it's a tree you give to your neighbors so that they can pick up the purple flowers.
I think I wrote that in the book.
Right, so there you go. You give it to your neighbor, and that way you get to enjoy it without any of the problems of having to pick up the leaves and blossoms that it will drop. So.
And speaking of that, if people... Let me know out there if you want me to do another edition of this book. We were talking about doing a 4th edition, and it's probably going to be more of a paperback.
Paperback?
Which will be a paperback writer, as the Beatles said in their song. But I don't know. We'll see about what's going to happen there.
Absolutely. Well, with that noise, we're going to go pay some bills. That means don't change that dial and don't change off. However you're getting this information, don't change away from it.
Stay with us as the Plant Talk continues here on AM 860, The Answer.
Interested in having a home consult? Remember, you can reach Stan at 727-423-4794 or on the web at AskMrGreenthumb.com.
Why choose Stafford Tree Service? Is it because they're experienced, have the latest equipment, and friendly professional personnel? Absolutely. Stafford's positioned themselves as a leading tree trimming company in all of Tampa Bay. With honest professionals and competitive pricing, they'll earn your trust too. In business for over 15 years, Stafford Tree Service is licensed, bonded, and insured to provide you the very best tree trimming experience. Call today, 727-546-8786, 727-546-8786. On the web at staffordtreesvc.com.
Biophilia, our innate attraction to other living things. It's why people love plants. And around Tampa Bay, Plants, that's Plantz, is bringing nature inside, in workspaces and homes by delivering beautiful foliage plants. Our plants increase oxygen and filter out pollutants, reducing stress and improving productivity. And get you in touch with your biophilic side. Go to plantz.us.
Welcome back to the Ask Mr. Green Thumb in Real Estate Show. Got questions about perennial flowers? What about issues with closing on your newest property? Give them a call at 727-254-7127. That's 727-254-7127. And now your hosts, Stan and James DeFreitas.
And I was going to say, you like James, my son. Why wouldn't you? He's a nice, friendly guy. We're trustworthy. And I help James do some stuff. You like us, you trust us. We're not a big name. And no, we're not going to tell you we're the top of the world. We're in the top 1% of the world and that you have to come to us. And that doesn't matter. I tell you the truth, all those people with all the big companies that want to tell you how important they are, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter at all. The agent you work with matters. Are they friendly? Are they competent? Do they know how to read a contract? Can they help put something together for you? Can they get you the best deal? Then I'd pick somebody you like. And you probably have somebody you do like. If you don't have somebody you like, then you might think of Stan or James DeFreitas. Why? Because we're knowledgeable, we're friendly, and we're small. We give you the service that you're looking for. A lot of times you go to these big companies, they'll go, we're going to send you to this guy. Yeah, he's just one of my new team, and he's been in for a month. We'd like to hand him something, or her. And that's fine. But, do they know the laws? Will they follow through? Will they make sure all the T's are crossed? Will they let you know at your condo if you need to get your board approval? All those little things, are they going to follow up? Or are they just going to go, we hope it works?
Right. Well, and too often that's what happens, especially in newer agents. And by newer, I refer to newer agents as, licensed in the last 5 years. It's difficult to know all of the minutia that you need to know. But to your point, again, if you're out there and you have a real estate license and you want to hold it with someone, you can certainly hold it with me. And again, my brokerage name is Dream It Real Estate, and you can type into your web browser dreamitrealestate.co, and you'll pull up my website and you can look at it and read more about me and what we do and that kind of thing. And again, there are tons of big box brokerages out there that you can hold your license with. Almost all of them come with a share of problems. Usually they want you to pay a monthly fee, anywhere between $75 and $200 a month, depending on who you might be with. So it's pretty expensive, and we don't, currently we're not charging any fees. So if somebody were to hold their license with me, it would be no fee. And then there's the opposite side of the spectrum in terms,
And a better split too.
Correct. And the other thing is they get a better split with me as well. And there's the opposite side of things. And I won't mention the brokerage by name, but then there's, the big box brokerage that takes everybody and anybody. And then they just charge a flat rate, for your, but you're getting almost nothing. You have a question? Oh yeah, I know. And this company that I'm referring to has over 2,000 agents.
And they got two brokers.
Right.
So what chance do you have to get much from them?
Right. So you're going to have very little in the way of training, very little in the way of one-on-one time. And you're paying for exactly what you get with that particular brokerage. It's one of the reasons why I think being with a boutique brokerage actually makes more sense for most agents, and especially if people have a strong knowledge base in the already built in. So you would get much more one-on-one individualism than you would.
Well, we worked for one of the big brokers one time, and the guy had his whole desk and walls with orange and green and purple notepads, and he had his little
Post-it
notes on there. And it's like, well, I get to those today, I get those tomorrow, the next day, and I get to those the day after. And I go, and you're that busy? Well, yes, I am.
Right.
And you go, well, how come? Well, because it makes people impressed if they see I've got 50 notes that I haven't returned calls to.
Right. Well, and again, it's a lot of people are, they have delusions of grandeur in their own mind and inflated egos. But that's not me. I mean, I'm very relatable. I'm what you see is what you get kind of person, and I don't believe in that there are any dumb questions, and I think that you should ask anything that people are uncertain about. One of the big things that I tend to do with new agents is I like to sit down and go over the contract, and if we need to, we'll go over it line by line so that there's an understanding. One of the things that's frustrating is that and this happens a lot, even at the big box, real estate companies, is that you kind of learn on the job. And you're learning off of making mistakes with clients that you're charging full price for. And I think that's a shame, because, they're paying full price for you to already be an expert. And there's so many real estate agents out there that they don't know who's an expert and who isn't, and they don't even know where to find out how long you've been licensed or how many transactions you've actually participated in. And so that makes it more difficult. So I guess what I'm saying is you can go with a big box brokerage, and there are some strengths to that. There's some weaknesses to that. you can go and have your license attached to a boutique brokerage, which is what I am with Dream Real Estate, and you're going to get one-on-one attention. So there's certainly an advantage there. Now, do I have the same amount of tool sets that maybe a big box brokerage has? No. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the people at these big box brokerages are using those tools that are being given to them. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the clients are getting an unfair advantage because of tools that their agents don't even know how to use at these big brokerages. So, there's a lot of training involved in knowing how to use some of the tools. And then some of the most successful agents in the business pay for their own tools anyway, outside of whatever's being supplied to them from a big brokerage. So I really don't see the advantage there other than they like being associated with a name brand. Now, if I could, I would like to mention a little bit of the real estate statistics from March of this year. And it's about, again, people are not going to be overly surprised with this if you have a good pace or a good understanding of market conditions. But in March of 2022, the year previously, we had 19,584 active listings. This last past, actually saying February of 2023, this last past February of 2023, so just 2 months ago, with 37,690 active listings. So not quite double, but that's how many the inventory has doubled almost in terms of what's available. So that takes a lot of pressure off of the buyers who were making these ridiculous offers and having to come up with offers that far exceeded the listing price. And then they would include a love letter, which we've discussed multiple times in the past, of I'm the best potential buyer because I'm the best Christian, or I'm the best, my wife serves on the teachers PTA, and they would include these things along with their offer to explain why they were the better choice of why you should pick their offer over another offer, which we won't even get into the discriminatory nature of what that could potentially bring about. But as far as I know, Pinellas Realtor Organization and Stellar MLS still allow these things, as far as I know. And if that's not the case, then someone can correct me. So I guess the other thing that people need to pay attention to is it's definitely easier for buyers to participate in the system now than it was a year ago. But the negative is that sellers are still commanding about the same price that they were getting before. If they're taking a little off, they're taking just a very small amount off in order to get it sold. So keep that in mind. And as we play that music, of course, it means we're going to go pay some bills, play some commercials, and don't change that dial, and I'll let you take it away.
The real estate and garden talk. If you've got a question, send me a sample. We'd like to see it. And people do from time to time. Stay with us as the Plant Talk and Real Estate Talk continues here on AM 860, The Answer.
Want to talk real estate? Remember, you can reach Stan at 727-423-4794 or on the web at AskMrGreenthumb.com. Broken air conditioner? Keep your home's AC running smoothly all year long with Easy Breezy AC. With thousands of active commercial and residential customers, Easy Breezy AC is Tampa Bay's most trusted HVAC company. Easy Breezy AC cares about those in need. Donate 2 cans of food and receive $20 off a $79 service call. Go to EasyBreezyAC.com and use promo code GreenThumb for an additional $10 off your service call. Call 727-856-HVAC. Life's hard. Comfort's not. Did you know that Stan DeFreitas, Mr. Green Thumb, can come to your house and examine your plants, trees, and palms? His knowledge can help you become the envy of your neighborhood with lush, green, healthy trees that don't just live, but thrive. Palms and oak trees are part of what makes Florida a beautiful place to live, but they get diseases and are often cut down. Ways to save your trees. Call or text Stan today at 727-423-4794 or go online to AskMrGreenthumb.com. That's AskMrGreenthumb.com. Welcome back to the Ask Mr. Green Thumb and Real Estate Show. Connect online at AskMrGreenthumb.com. Got questions about gardening, real estate, or both? Give him a call at 727-254-7127. That's 727-254-7127. And now your hosts, Stan and James DeFreitas.
And let me come right back to that because I was pointed out by my intelligent son. If you can go to Ask Mr. Mr. Green and then Thumb. It's my website. You can go there and there's a little click. You can click on it and you can send me a picture. I like pictures because I can see things.
Sure, they can either go through your website or they could even text you a picture directly to you at your number.
727-423-4794. That's 727-423-4794. I'll hit it with my radio voice.
The radio voice. It's just a slightly deeper voice.
I used to think when I first started in radio, I thought, oh my gosh, this is Walter
Walter
Cronkite. Yeah,
Cronkite.
I don't really have that, I thought. So how am I going to do it? And then I realized, you didn't really have to have
You
Walter
don't have to have
Cronkite.
that. You have to have the knowledge. And then I really don't care how people's voices sound. Although I will say, if you have a nice sounding timbre to your voice, people will listen more, I think, than if your voice is.
If it's real squeaky sounding, I think you want to probably miss it.
You might want to work on that. Yeah, but
Right.
I did think that was funny that I did some national commercials at one point. I did some voiceover work, and I've done a number of major companies, actually bigger than anything right out of Tampa or Hillsborough or Pinellas. But if you want that big voice, I can do it for you, and I can do a spot for you. I mean, I was a half owner of a marketing company at one point. I sometimes think I should be it again because I've seen some of the marketing being done by some of the companies, and I'm going, my gosh, I could write better copy and I could start off with a better name. But that's just my personal opinion and no slaps at anyone. But I do like, and I've talked to a number of companies out there who are in marketing and they're going, I find one of the problems, and I was at Publix the other day, and I said, I pitched something for Publix one time. And the guy called me up and he goes, I don't think so, because you're telling people they could grow their own. We want them to grow it here. I said, well, you sell live herbs and stuff at your store. If they grow some of their veggies, they'd still have an appreciation for what you're doing.
Right.
He goes, yeah, but I'm like head of marketing here and in Lakeland, and it isn't my idea.
Sounds like he's from Jersey.
And I
this
said,
guy.
well, just because it isn't your idea, it doesn't mean it's good. I said, you mean if I charged you like $1 million and then told you the same idea, you'd listen? Yeah, that's pretty much the way I do it. If you charge me a whole bunch of money, then I know you got to be good.
Right.
And
right.
I said,
there's again, one of the things that, I don't care what business you're in. If you don't take time to figure out what the objection is going to be to the service that you're requesting, you will always be behind the eight ball, so to speak. You always have to have what I call objection handling. And I don't care if it's in real estate or if you're, in the tree space. I mean, one of the things that Stan, that I help you do is, we will go out and take a look at trees that are, that maybe are in trouble, or they're just not sure what's going wrong with the tree and why it's not its fullest. I am happy to report that as soon as I pulled in, I took a picture of the magnolia out here at the radio studio where we broadcast from here at the mighty AM 860. And we treated their one magnolia tree that was looking rather sickly, and now there are more blooms on it than you can count. I mean, so it's a testimonial in and of itself, even though trees don't speak loud enough for people to, and most of the time people don't even notice how, what we've done. That they always notice when they think it's near time for a chainsaw. That they notice, but they never seem to notice the in-between cycles that trees get into. And I'm happy to say that magnolia looks pretty darn healthy. Got a little bit of fertilizer in it. We also injected it with a pesticide. And trees are one of these commodities that we should save. There are no voices for trees. And unlike what most people would say, believe it or not, Republicans and liberals alike want to save trees. We don't want to see trees cut down unnecessarily. And one of our sponsors, of course, is Stafford Tree Service. And she doesn't want to cut them down either. She wants to keep as many trees as she can because she understands that, it's a good thing to hold on to your trees. And, if you've ever read any of the works by Jared Diamond, you'll know that societies that fail to pay attention to their trees usually collapse.
Yeah, there's some islands, one of the Puerto Rico and Haiti.
Well, Haiti in particular.
One half kept their trees.
Haiti and Dominican Republic, you mean?
Dominican Republic. The one half Dominican Republic kept most of their trees. The Haiti area tended to burn all their trees, cut all their trees down for firewood and stuff. And so they had a much tougher economy partly because you lost some of your shade and your your fuel.
Right. Well, you're giving away some of your most precious commodities. And trees, again, are again, if you care about the environment and, and you want to have increased carbon sequestration, is no better carbon sequestration machine than a tree. So I sort of differ, and I don't want to get political, but I sort of differ on the Bill Gates philosophy that you can, basically what he's doing is, tech billionaires fly around in their private jets, and then they don't want to feel bad about flying around on their private jets, but they still want to be for their green team, I like to say. So what they do is they pay for carbon capture. And, and then they're putting money into these systems that will take CO2 and carbon monoxide out of the air and sequester it.
So I need to have the Ask Mr. Greenthumb plant a tree for Bill Gates routine.
Well, in my opinion, this is a misguided approach. Mother Nature has built in the perfect mechanism for dealing with this problem. And the mechanism is plant more trees, and then, we'll let trees help us do some of the things that would help clean the environment. So ties into our other sponsor, with plants, plantz.us or plantz.com if you want to buy a plant. But one of the things that's cool there is that, he's, and we've had Steve Stanford on before, he's always talking about biophilia. And part of that is making sure that your space, that you're in tune with nature and that you're doing your little part. You can keep your indoor environment cleaner too by having plants in the indoor space. So we certainly encourage that. One of the things I was going to mention too, I printed up another article that I thought was kind of interesting, but it's real estate related. So I'm going to do a hard shift and pivot away from the tree topic that we were just talking about.
Don't worry, folks. I'll bring it back in a few minutes.
He'll bring it back, I promise. But one of the things I was going to mention, I'm always paying attention to scams because scams tend to, they're not new. Most of the scams are actually rather old.
The scams have been around since man. Yeah.
Right. But here's one that's making a little bit of a comeback. And it's and the reason that I wanted to mention it is that it was fresh in my mind with land sales. Okay, and this is happening. This story is happening based in Panama City, Florida. Okay, so central Panhandle kind of area, and it was discussed pretty hard by the Central Panhandle Association of Realtors, and it's making the rounds again. And apparently, this scam involves a fake seller contacting a real estate agent to list a property. Usually it's vacant land. And then what happens is they never owned it. And so what happens here in this particular scam is that the actual owners are unaware that their property is being listed. Okay, so they had no idea. Okay, and the seller then impersonates the owner all the way up until closing. And they will furnish a fake ID to the title company while attempting to try to collect funds on a property they never owned.
How do they cash that?
Well,
Make up their own account?
One of the things that has become more prevalent is you're not really ever getting a check. You're usually having funds wired.
Here's an account number.
Here's an account number.
Oh, my. Okay.
Yeah. So, again, you never even knew your property was for sale because it wasn't for sale.
Wow, that's pretty ballsy.
Yeah, so you have to think about that. I mean, and one of the things I guess what I'm trying to tell people is that just because a guy tells you he owns it on the phone, it's a nice thought that he owns it, but you better make sure that you're double checking. I mean,
check the public records, find the person's number, which you can find today, call that person directly and say from another number.
Right.
Don't just talk to that person. And I saw a thing the other day. They can now with voice, they can actually copy your voice.
Yeah, Chat GPT.
And they had somebody that sounded a lot like one of the major talk show hosts, and he goes, "Well, it wasn't him. I think it was Joe Rogan. They did a thing on him. You could not tell by listening, and anybody who's listening to Joe, he has a particular sounding voice. We all do.
Right.
I mean, and even in my case, I have a particular voice. Your voice is so similar to mine. I have many people go, "Gosh, your son sounds exactly like you." Well, we're a little different, but yeah, we're pretty close.
Right. Well, and spooky, and I'm sure that we're not the only ones that have had this happen, but there are times where I'll say something and I can't think of the word, and then you'll say the word, and eventually that was the word I was looking for, which I find a little spooky in and of itself, but in a cool kind of way. But yet, I guess the thing that I would like to say is that in the real estate space, there will always be scammers. And so don't always assume that the information that's being given to you on this hot listing is legitimate. And I'm not saying that you need to look at the world as a glass half empty kind of thing, because a lot of people do that. Some lawyers even look at it as glass half empty, and I encourage people to always look at it as glass half full. But you want to do your due diligence. So it's kind of back to that Ronald Reaganism, which is trust but verify.
Yep.
And once you've verified something enough times, you'll feel that you can trust that person or that transaction going forward.
And even be more vigilant today than you might have ever been. And be vigilant when someone calls you and goes, even if the voice sounds like your relative, realize it could be cloned. So get on there and call that person, your relative, and make sure it's them, because they're saying, oh, I've been arrested and I need you to send this wired here.
Right. Well, I mean,
or crypto or whatever.
Well, thankfully, most older people don't have crypto. So that's one positive. But one of the things that was mentioned to me not too long ago was from our buddy Ramsey and his mother, who's in her, I think she's 90 or something like that. She's up there in her age. And so she's received over the last probably 2 to 3 years, she's had half a dozen fake grandsons call her saying that they need money, that they're in trouble.
Yeah, send me the money.
Right. And of course she's
go down to Walmart and get those cards.
And of course she's a pretty sharp lady. So she was constantly going, well, okay, well, you remember that time of when we celebrated your 8th birthday? Remember where we went? She'll ask them a question.
And they don't. Yeah.
And then when they get that wrong, because they don't have that memory, then you know that you're being scammed. And of course, when she tried to ask that, they would want to change the subject. I really don't like talking about the past a whole lot.
Well, lucky for her, she's smarter than 99% of the population out there still.
Right. So I guess what I'm saying is be vigilant. I still believe that the world is still a good place, and that 99% of the time you're going to run into normal things. Be aware that there is that 1% out there that isn't on the up and up, and make sure that you take proactive measures to protect yourself. And if you feel, and if that little inner voice is telling you, hey, this sounds funky, listen to it, because it might be right. And hey, if you're wrong and you do a background check and it proves that they're legit, then great. You now are in a real deal.
That's true. So if you're sending money, you double check. Just don't send it, because somebody can send you wiring instructions and it could be crooked. So you do the extra due diligence. We're going to say you're listening to James DeFreitas, Stan DeFreitas. We're here on the Ask Mr. Greenthumb Gardening and Real Estate Show. So don't change that dial. You stay with us as the plant talk continues.
Want to talk real estate? Call James DeFreitas at 727-254-7127 or go online, aflre.com.
Why choose Stafford Tree Service? Is it because they're experienced, have the latest equipment, and friendly professional personnel? Absolutely. Stafford's positioned themselves as a leading tree trimming company in all of Tampa Bay. With honest professionals and competitive pricing, they'll earn your trust too. In business for over 15 years, Stafford Tree Service is licensed, bonded, and insured to provide you the very best tree trimming experience. Call today, 727-546-8786, 727-546-8786. On the web at staffordtreesvc.com.
Biophilia, our innate attraction to other living things. It's why people love plants. And around Tampa Bay, Plants, that's Plantz, is bringing nature inside in workspaces and homes by delivering beautiful foliage plants. Our plants increase oxygen and filter out pollutants, reducing stress and improving productivity. And get you in touch with your biophilic side. Go to plantz.us.
Welcome back to the Ask Mr. Greenthumb and Real Estate Show. Got questions about perennial flowers? What about issues with closing on your newest property? Give them a call at 727-254-7127. That's 727-254-7127. And now your hosts, Stan and James DeFreitas.
So James and I were talking during the break about there was somebody recently tried to scam somebody. They're sending them wiring instructions. Double check on that, because that is not always, proofed. I mean, we just came out with, Twitter. Thank God Elon Musk bought it, because you find out that half the information out there was being usurped. And I don't care if you love Elon or you don't love Elon, you're a Republican or Democrat. A lot of scamming was being done. A lot of people, a lot of bots, and a lot of people who were saying that, listening to even your direct, your DMs and stuff, that shouldn't be,
it shouldn't have been like that.
You assume that it's not, and you find out that maybe, why is our government spending money on social media? Doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, that's something they definitely, there has to be a neutral playing field, as neutral as it can be. And, right at the moment, it isn't. So, or at least it wasn't. And so I think there's going to have to be a little bit of trust and confidence rebuilt in that space. It's, it is what it is. But anyways, we are here, of course, and we're talking about gardening and real estate. And one of the aspects that we like to talk about, of course, is gardening, because it fits into that area. But something that I thought was kind of interesting that I wanted to mention was an article that I was reading as I was prepping for this show yesterday. It's kind of a startling statistic. And again, this was originally reported by Megan Bowman from WUSF 89.7. So I want to make sure I properly give her the credentials for writing this story. But one of the things that was being talked about in her story is that I guess this past year, the citrus industry crop was one of the smallest since World War II. And it's something that you're very familiar with. And of course, maybe tell people a little bit about citrus greening.
Yeah, greening is a disease that has affected so many of the fruit, and it affected me personally. I had a navel tree, beautiful navel. It used to give me just fantastic navels that were, 3-inch and wide and yellow and tasty. And I liked a navel because you can use it as a juice, or I preferred it as a hand-eating orange. But it became misshapen, and it was dropping fruit early, and it would be very dry inside and pithy. And I knew it wasn't the way it's supposed to be. And unfortunately, once you get that greening, you have a problem. And even though the tree looked pretty good, the foliage looked pretty good, the blooms smelled great. So I kept thinking, maybe next year it'll grow out of it, even though I knew.
You knew.
I knew what it had. And eventually it broke my heart to cut it down and to get rid of it, because I thought you're just a breeding ground for more disease. But, and that brings me back to a court case years ago. They came in, the government said, we're taking all your trees. Now, we're not going to really pay you very much. And it turned out that they had to pay them. And they were saying, well, we're going to give you an inch per tree. Not an inch per inch, but just give you,
what a sapling might cost. Yeah, and that doesn't necessarily get it done either in terms of fair compensation. But what's interesting about this citrus greening is, again, it's a bacterial disease, and it has been very devastating as it relates to, making sure that, we haven't had the amount of crop. And again, Florida orange growers forecasted a crop of 16.1 million or 90, and of course they pack them in 90-pound boxes, 16.1 million pounds boxes, I guess, or, that's what they amounted to. And the issue for citrus greening is a scenario where, again, as Stan alluded to just a minute ago, it turns the fruit, causes it to have a bitter taste. The fruit's misshapen, and unfortunately, there's no cure available for citrus greening. So what have they ultimately come up with? Well, there is hope. And so one of the things that's interesting is that the officials went out there and they've discovered a new variety, a variety called Donaldson tree. And what's interesting here is they found that this tree seems to be somewhat immune to citrus greening. And so, they were unsure. And again, I don't know what this means because, again, I don't have the history that you have, but they did a Brix acid ratio test, which means nothing to me.
Probably checking for sugars.
Well, yeah, and apparently what they did is they said they did this test, and it was determined, hey, this is good fruit, and they got together and said, hey, something's different about this tree because this tree's been here for 30 years, and it's not been infected with citrus greening. And so now the thought process is to replicate this tree and get it out to the masses and stop growing the other varieties that seem susceptible to citrus greening. So it's not so much that they have a cure as much as they're going to just choose a different variety that seems to be hardier, or have, a Darwinian chance advantage of being better again, it has an adaptation that makes it a much more robust type of tree that doesn't allow itself to be infected by citrus greening. And so that looks like that would be the thing to do, is to start growing the kind that's more resistant or is completely resistant to it. And none of that tree's fruit is not misshapen, and it has the appropriate taste.
And that's what they're looking for. I mean, that would be great. There are some growers out right now, too, that are growing in kind of not really greenhouses, but covered areas so they can keep out the vector that's spreading the disease, which is usually a small insect. And they've been doing that. They have to make the tops kind of opaque so you can get all that foliage that can get to the sun. And you've got to make something big enough because some of these trees want to be 25 to 30 feet tall. But that was another idea that they were working on to see. I mean, typically in the old days, you had Hamlin, which were a juice early orange, and you had mid-size, the Hamlin. Then you'd have like Temples, some of the others, and
so the Donaldson tree is not something you're aware of.
No. And the ending, we had Valencia, which was the late juice orange,
and all of those varieties did get citrus greening. Is that the case?
Well, yeah. Some of it may be dependent upon rootstock and stuff too. Now I've got a lime that's not 20 feet away from the other tree that had the greening, and the limes don't seem to get greening like the orange trees do.
Right. And again, you got a sister of a cousin there. So to me, we ought to be figuring out what genetic differences or DNA differences make those trees different. And again, I'm not suggesting genetically modified foods, but I am saying that if we can alter things a little bit in some way to make them resistant to that, it's probably a good thing for Florida's economy. And again, you want people to have access to orange juice. It is something that was, it's on the cover of your book as in place of at least this copy of your book, where it's a hardbound book and lots of beautiful artwork done on it. It's central to Florida in the sense that the artist understood that, let's, paint an orange on there in place of the sun.
Kind of made it a sun and an orange at the same time.
Right. But it's a good symbolic gesture towards what Florida has been about for so long. And so that's why it's such an issue and why we're taking the time to talk about this newly found Donaldson tree, because if they do have a way of growing trees that are more resistant or completely immune to citrus greening, why wouldn't you want to do that?
Now, did they talk in that article about rootstocks? Or are they talking about it? I'm not really familiar with that. I hate to say, but I'd be more interested.
And it's one of the reasons why I brought in this article, because I was just going to hand it to you when we were done, because part of doing this show is making sure that we stay in the loop of being educated about what's going on in the world and in various areas and spaces. And between gardening and real estate, I like to try to stay up on stuff, which are two vast fields, by the way, if you don't know. And it doesn't really talk about rootstocks as much as it's talking about the idea that this tree is a type of tree that's been growing in this citrus orchard for a long time.
So a named variety, but we need to know.
You would need to know more
what the
about
rootstock
it. I'll hand
is.
you that, and you can do some more homework on that for me for the next show.
Almost all citrus was either grafted on sour orange or on a rootstock that was hardy, and you could have rough lemon used to be a rootstock also used, but almost all citrus commercially was grafted either onto either one of those. Now, rough lemon wouldn't be as cold hardy as in some areas of the state,
which could be a problem,
as a sour orange.
Right. Well, then you only grow those in frostproof.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's a Florida joke, by the way. If you don't know what I mean by that, is that the whole town was named Frostproof. Frostproof Florida, because it would never freeze in that area until it did. And then they realized they were less than frostproof, which I think is the new name of that town, less than frostproof.
Well, it's funny. I belonged for a while. I guess I may still be a member of Central Florida Gardening Group, and they were like telling me, "Oh, it never freezes ever in Orlando in North." And I go, "Well, it has.
It has.
It's done even down here, even here in Tampa Bay area, when we're typically on another level protected more. It's when it gets into that cold period, and climate has been changing forever.
Right.
People go, well, it's climate change.
Climate
And
crisis.
You can argue about that, but it's climate has never been the same on the earth ever. It's always changing.
And I agree with that. And for those, we appreciate you listening to our show. And of course, the eclectic Dr. Bill Handelman is coming up next. So don't change the dial and let you take it away.
Stay with us, or stay with us each week. Stay with Bill coming up. He'll answer your questions.
Interested in having a home consult? Remember, you can reach Stan at 727-423-4794 or on the web at AskMrGreenthumb.com.